I mentioned in my last video that no one watches Godzilla movies for the human characters, and I still don't think that's completely true. I'll admit a lot of my favorites have somewhat lackluster casts, Destroya, 84, but the most engaging ones are the ones with great human casts. Now, don't argue with me on that because I have the numbers to prove it. But long before we had Koichi Shikishima, a man tormented by a survivor's guilt who has to get back on the saddle to fight Godzilla, we had Akane Yashiro, a woman tormented by a survivor's guilt who has to get back on the saddle to fight Godzilla. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but Akane is held by many, including myself, to be one of, if not the greatest Godzilla character. And since she's so beloved, it's no surprise that when Toho tried to make a follow-up to her story without her, it wasn't well received. But was it deserved? I'd argue no. Kind of. This one's gonna be a little less structured than usual. Let's just talk about it. Now, the Godzilla franchise is split into several different series. You got Showa, Heisei, or Versus, Millennium, Monsterverse, and Reiwa. And personally, I kinda hate how it's organized. It's just a massive clusterfuck, especially Reiwa and Heisei. What the fuck is happening here? Only 2 of these came out in the Reiwa era. Neither Heisei nor Versus work for that series because the first one in continuity, Return of Godzilla, is the only one to not have Versus in the title, and the only one to not come out in the Heisei era. It's still Showa. But that's not really important. What is important is the Millennium series. Unlike Showa, Heisei, and Monsterverse, the Millennium series isn't one set continuity across all the films. Each one is a separate reboot, starting over from the beginning in 1954. All except for Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S. Tokyo S.O.S. is a sequel to the previous entry in the Millennium series, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, the movie that introduced Akane. These two making up what's known as the Kiryu Saga. But why is Akane so beloved? What's her story? Well, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla starts with Akane being deployed to combat Godzilla on another rampage. As you could expect, it doesn't go super well, and Akane accidentally gets some of her comrades killed. But we do get this sick-ass shot before the title. But the government is sick of all the monster attacks, like in Godzilla, Mothra, and War of the Gargantuas for some reason. So what's the Japanese government gonna do? Project Kiryu, aka build a fucking robot on top of the original Godzilla skeleton.
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
And because she's the main character, Akane is chosen to pilot Mechagodzilla, and she is put through hell. She has to deal with her crippling self-doubt, her co-pilots being assholes, Mechagodzilla going rogue because he's been possessed by Godzilla's ghost. But hey, at least she gets a pretty sick hat. A hat so sick that I also bought one. And while Akane isn't super unique in the grand scheme of things, she's pretty much a better version of Kiriko from Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, whose actress Misato Tanaka gets an extended cameo in this one for some reason. I think the execution of Akane's character is done incredibly well. Her arc is super satisfying. She suffers so much, but she never wavers. She stays committed. You really want to see her succeed. And the supporting cast is fun too. I like Sarah and Dr. Yuhara. Togashi is a great mentor figure for Akane, and Hayama is a fun, if basic, rival. But Akane is the main draw. And let's just get the biggest issue out of the way. Tokyo S.O.S. does not have good characters. Akane is present in the movie for about 2 minutes, and then she's written out of the story completely. Apparently it's because the actress Yumiko Shaku was committed to another film, Sky High, directed by Ryuhei Kitamura, the absolute mad lad that gave us Godzilla Final Wars. But Akane is replaced by Chujo, Azusa, and Akiba. and they exist. Shujo is generic main character man, Azusa is generic badass female lead, and Akiba is generic rival guy. Different from the other generic rival guy. And I won't beat around the bush, that's all I really have to say about them. They're so plain I can't even really extrapolate anything else about them. And that might sound a little weird, let me explain. Take Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Another personal favorite of mine that gets dunked on far too often. The main character, Kazuma Aoki, I love. This man is the most autistic son of a bitch I have ever seen, and I will not be taking any counter-arguments. It's not something that's ever stated, but like, look at him. His hyperfixations are robots and pterodactyls.
Single with no children. Hobbies? Pteranodons?
Right, sir. Don't you know what they are, sir? They're small flying dinosaurs.
But technically speaking, it's just my interpretation. But it makes that movie all the more enjoyable to me. And I can't really do that for these guys, because there's nothing to really interpret about them. They just exist. Oh, Chujo has model planes and has a weird obsession with Mechagodzilla. Okay, join the club. I guess you could argue that Chujo and Akiba are gay.
With my skill, I can overcome any maintenance problems.
Just take care of them, will ya?
But like, you could also say that about basically any set of rivals. But they're not the only characters in the movie. But spoiler alert, the supporting cast aren't any more interesting. We got the guy from the original Mothra, who's Chujo's uncle or something. We got Chujo's nephew, who isn't as annoying as a kid from a Showa Gamera movie, which isn't a huge accomplishment, but it's still something. We got Prime Minister Igarashi, who I only really like because he's a Kira and a cow, and that man has a hell of a voice.
失ったものは大きい。しかし我々は自らの過ちに気づき、その過ちを認める勇気を得た。
And then we got Mothra's fairies, who are barely worth mentioning aside from the fact that I somehow only just now found out that one of them is played by Masami Nagasawa, who played Asami in Shin Ultraman. And that movie fucking rips. So, the characters are a substantial downgrade from Against Mechagodzilla. However, I don't really mind that. Tokyo S.O.S. is much more plot-driven, while Against Mechagodzilla is more character-driven. And I kinda like the plot of this one. Not because it's especially well written, more so because it's wacky in a way we don't usually see in this series. Like, I love Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah because of how fucking insane it is, but it is a mess. In this one, the bones that they build Mechagodzilla on top of want to be laid to rest in the ocean, and Mothra and her twin fairies are really pushing for it for balance of nature reasons or something. And from there, it devolves into a big battle between Goji, Kiryu, and Mothra. A three-way monster melee, if you will. And that brings me to what I actually do love about Tokyo S.O.S., namely, the action. Now, as much as I love Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, the action wasn't my favorite. There's really only one battle, since Mechagodzilla goes rogue as soon as Godzilla shows up, and then Godzilla just bounces.
Godzilla sucks dick?
And when they do fight at the end, it just kind of looks like they're hugging each other super aggressively at times. Don't get me wrong, it's a great fight. There's a lot of added emotional weight once Akane starts piloting Kiryu from inside, but there's room for improvement. And the fights in Tokyo S.O.S. go hard as hell. Half the movie is pretty much one long monster brawl, and the choreography is a massive step up. Mothra adds some welcome variety to the fights. I love the bit where she just sends Godzilla flying down the street. There's still some hugging, but the majority feels like an upgrade. Mothra's death glitter, Godzilla's atomic breath reflecting back at him, Godzilla biting off Mothra's leg, the bit where Mechagodzilla stabs Godzilla in the dick. The bit where they both body slam the fucking Diet building, holy shit! I don't know, I just love seeing the Diet building being destroyed. I am very excited for the Ultraman Blazer movie. And besides the action, I also love the monster designs. The Imago Mothra puppet is probably my favorite Mothra design of all time. The wing patterns are a little plain, but I like how insectoid she looks. Her legs and wings are also puppeteered incredibly well. It's leaps and bounds ahead of pretty much every other Mothra puppet. However, the larva puppets are a little disappointing. The Mothra larvae have looked the same in pretty much every movie, barring King of the Monsters. And I guess I just wish there was a little more innovation on that front, given how amazing the Amigo is. Tokyo S.O.S. also has one of my favorite Mechagodzilla designs. The Kiryu design was great in the last movie, but I vastly prefer the all-silver look compared to the blue shoulder cannons. But that's just personal. And as I said in my last video, I love me a Mechagodzilla with cracked abilities. The detachable cannons, his chest mazer, his drill hand, etc. Goddamn, I love it. I'm a little disappointed by the removal of the Absolute Zero cannon, but it's kinda hard to work it into the story, so I give that a pass. My thoughts on the Godzilla design are a little more complicated. I'm not huge on the design from 2000 and Megaguirus. I'm just not a huge fan of the purple and green color scheme, spikier dorsal plates and skin, or the cold, dead eyes. And Against Mechagodzilla has an updated version of the design, with his skin back to the normal charcoal gray and a much improved face. And in Tokyo S.O.S. he has an added chest scar from the previous battle, which had some nice definition. It's probably my favorite Godzilla design in the Millennium series that isn't GMK or Final Wars. But something they carried over from Megaguirus that I love is Michiro Oshima's score. I mentioned it in my last video, but Michiro Oshima is probably my favorite Godzilla composer after Akira Ifukube. Her Mechagodzilla fanfare is spectacular. Her new Mothra theme is godly.
Godlike.
And I also appreciate the brief use of Mothra's song used when she's first unveiled. And Oshima's Godzilla theme is really the only non-Ifukube Godzilla theme that I feel is on the same level as his. I'm usually a little mixed on non-Ifukube soundtracks. I've made it abundantly clear how I feel about Chunky XL, and I'm so-so on Masaru Sato and Koichi Sugiyama. But I really like Naoki Sato's, Reijiro Kuroku's, and Ko Otani's work, even if they only got one movie each. But Michiro Oshima is above all of them. Tokyo S.O.S. is unfortunately the last Godzilla movie she scored, and I don't really know where the franchise will go post -1, but I can only hope she returns to the series soon. She's great. I follow her on Twitter. She's so sweet. Now, despite all that, I can understand why people don't really care for Tokyo S.O.S. It's a very lackluster follow-up to Against Mechagodzilla, and it's an absolute joke that they followed up Akane with a bunch of NPCs. And I didn't even mention that a lot of the story that isn't absolutely insane is ripping off other Godzilla movies. Mothra having 2 children that avenge their mother and take down Godzilla is ripped almost bar for bar straight from Mothra vs. Godzilla. The whole ending sequence with Chujo being trapped inside Kiryu feels like a worse version of the last movie. Bottom line, even if I disagree, I completely understand why it has the reputation that it has. However, I'd like to get a little personal for a minute, because Tokyo S.O.S. was one of the first Godzilla movies I saw when I was really getting into it, and it holds a special place in my heart. And the opening scene really left an impression on me. It is my favorite opening scene in the entire Godzilla franchise. Most of the time we either get Godzilla rampaging, Godzilla being woken up so he can rampage later, some guys in a boat getting absolutely fucked, or some combination of the three. Tokyo S.O.S. doesn't have any of that. We start with Oshima's magnificent Godzilla and Mechagodzilla themes, showing where each of them are after their insane battle. We then shift to some fighter pilots being deployed to investigate an unknown enemy. And keep in mind, we don't know that Mothra's involved yet. So these guys catch up to this flying mass shrouded in clouds and start giving them the rundown in English for some reason.
You are violating Japanese air domain. Take reverse course immediately.
But they don't get a response. We get a key change in the soundtrack. The tension is building. They fire a warning shot and are met with an eerie angelic singing. Then the new Mothra theme starts blaring. One of the pilots starts panicking and nopes the fuck out of there, while the remaining one continues pursuit and is nearly taken down by this silent enemy. We cut back to the ground crew after losing contact, receiving the latest images from the fighters. The picture unscrambles, and the commanding officer immediately knows what's up. Get the full reveal of Mothra's wing, and cut to title. God fucking damn. They did not need to go that hard, but they did. This scene stuck with me ever since I first saw it years ago. Regardless of whether or not you think the rest of the movie lives up to this cold open, in all seriousness, as much as I like it, it doesn't quite manage it. It's still a very well done bit of tension. But what makes me love it more is the fact that I got to see it on the big screen. Last year, for its 20th anniversary, Tokyo S.O.S. was released in US theaters for one night only, even though we were way closer to its 19th anniversary, but that's neither here nor there. It was actually paired up with Gemstone's Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex short, which kind of ended up overshadowing Tokyo S.O.S. a little bit. And you can bet that my ass was seated, if only for that killer opening. And I can confirm, that opening did not disappoint. When it cut to the title, I got chills. Full transparency, I teared up a little bit. But before I close things out, here's just a bunch of stuff I couldn't fit into the rest of the video. A lightning round. In Against Mechagodzilla, the Maser tanks use the same stock electricity sound effect that they used for Ultraman Belial's Battlenizer in the Ultra Galaxy movie. That's not a bad thing, I just find it funny every time that happens. Something else I get a lot of enjoyment out of when watching Godzilla movies is when a random background character is played by someone I recognize from Ultraman, which happens way more often than you'd think. In Against Mechagodzilla, there's a brief appearance by Maria Teresa Gao, who was Georgie in Ultraman Gaia, in the scene introducing the Absolute Zero cannon. There's also a cameo from Shingo Yanagisawa, who I recognize as Shibakawa in Ultraman Orb. And he stars as Man Whose House Was Destroyed. The Japanese title of this movie is actually Godzilla x Mothra x Mechagodzilla, Tokyo S.O.S. But it was shortened to just Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S. for its American release. And I only bring that up because why didn't they do that for Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack? There are several other movies in the series that have this title format, and they were all shortened. Why not GMK? Now we have to call it GMK. Anyway, both of these movies have a post-credit scene. The scene in Tokyo S.O.S. is a straightforward sequel tease that never went anywhere. But Against Mechagodzilla kind of baffles me. The credits roll as Godzilla retreats and Akane stands triumphantly on Kiryu's shoulder. The post-credit scene is Akane, Yuhara, and Sarah talking about Kiryu's success, with some payoff for the whole thing about Yuhara trying to date Akane. And I feel like this could have just been the final scene, but the shot of her standing on the Kiryu as the credits roll goes kinda hard too. But also the final shot of the post-credit scene is cut really awkwardly. We have Akane leaving, but she stops to salute Kiryu, and then moves on. And you could either cut it as she salutes, or cut when she leaves the frame after she's done. But instead, she salutes, turns to leave, and then it freezes, and then fades to black. I don't get it. Mothra's fairies, or Shobijin, get names in this movie. Mio and Hana. It's not the first time they've done that, and it's also pretty much irrelevant. They exclaim each other's names as the second Mothra is born. And the English dub completely does away with it anyway.
Look, there's two!
But I think it's a nice detail. Speaking of the dubs of both of these movies are weird about Mechagodzilla's nickname of Kiryu.
Kiryu?
And against Mechagodzilla, the dub refers to him as Kiyu most of the time.
I'm leading the Kiyu squad.
Kiyu Squad?
And the dub of Tokyo S.O.S. calls him Mecha G for short.
Airman Chujo, Mecha G ground crew.
It's not that important, but the subtitles, or should I say dub titles on the Sony Blu-ray keep Mecha G instead of Kiryu, and I just don't like that. Speaking of the Sony Blu-rays, the only special features on most of them are just the original trailers for each movie, which is cool, I guess. But behind-the-scenes featurettes are included on the releases of 2000, Final Wars, and Tokyo S.O.S., and those are way cooler. But the Against Mechagodzilla disc only has the original trailer, but it includes the wrong trailer. It has the trailer for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. I can sort of understand, since technically they have the same Japanese titles with a different preposition in between.
Godzilla 対メカゴジラ。Godzilla 対メカゴジラ。
I just think it's funny, especially since they doubled down by uploading it on their YouTube channel with the wrong title. Speaking of which, Godzilla x Mechagodzilla is a cooler title than Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I don't know, that's just how I feel. And lastly, there's a short scene in Tokyo S.O.S. where Hayama, Akane's rival in the previous movie, offers her a drink and tries to make her feel more comfortable at a party. It's a tiny moment, but it shows how far their relationship has come since the last movie, and I just think that's really sweet. But it's not quite enough to save the movie. I fully acknowledge that Tokyo S.O.S. is a deeply flawed movie, and it absolutely pales in comparison to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. However, I still think it deserves a little more attention, because what it gets right, it nails. The action, the music, the designs, I love it so much. I know it's derivative, has lackluster characters, and is just a weaker version of the last movie, but I can look past it. As I said in my last video, we're all entitled to our own opinions. I'm just a little sad that it'll never be able to step outside the shadow of its cooler older brother. But regardless, GMK is better than both of them. Okay, bye.
Nothing brightens a dark room like light from a window. Time to open the window!